Good afternoon. Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Ian, this is Jane.
Hi.
And we've just seen our first shows of the day. The reason I'm saying shows is because we split up and we went to separate things. Although we had press tickets for both, we both wanted to see different things. I went to the zoo south side, which wasn't very far from where we were staying, to an Art27 Scotland. They called it a show, but I doubt that. Now, you won't be able to see this because it was just today, but having said that, it's worth mentioning that Art27 are doing some really interesting pieces and shows and other things right throughout the festival. So have a look, if you put Art27 into the Fringe website, it'll give you all of their shows, and there's quite a few things. I went to a piece called From the Horse's Mouth, and I'm just going to read the little synopsis bit. It says, Artist in Residence Elaine Cheng presents her new sonic art piece that musically delves into the lived experiences of the Hong Kong and Chinese migrant communities in Edinburgh, and followed by a fascinating conversation with feminist politician Sarah Liu, writer and cultural commentator Katie Goh, and Scottish Chinese poet Jay Goh on racism experienced in East and South West Asian people in Scotland. And then we had a little bit of Jay's poetry. He only did read one poem right at the end. I have to say I was slightly disappointed. The sonic piece was quite short. It was probably about no more than 10 minutes. It was quite loud. It was quite a large room we were in. I think quite a decent sized theatre actually. Reasonably well attended. We had just before that, we had a really nice little thing at the beginning where they gave us tea or coffee. I had Chinese tea, which I've obviously had before in Hong Kong, and you could have a steamed roll, which I actually didn't fancy. But then the very nice lady who was at the tea counter said, "Would you like a muffin?" So I got a muffin, which was lovely actually. So that, and there are certainly there's quite a few of these things. They call them the breakfast sessions. So you will get. I know they're doing a Polish one, I think, sometime next week, where you will get traditional Polish pastries and things like that as the breakfast. So, it's quite a nice little side event, actually. Yeah. The musical piece, it was quite loud. It was almost slightly distorted, and it was quite drony in places. And there was snippets of, obviously, the Chinese community in Edinburgh, of their voices, but actually it was mixed to such a point that I couldn't tell what the words were.
Okay.
And they did have there was, although it says there's like a multimedia experience part of it, it wasn't really. There was just there was some screens around, but there was only one screen at the back was used, and it had some of the words that were used, but you couldn't tell what the words were in the piece. Now that's a mixing issue really. You needed to be able to hear, whether they were speaking in Chinese or English, you needed to know what they were saying. And actually on the screen they had Chinese words, but you couldn't say what they were in because there was no English translation.
Right, okay.
What probably should have been better is to do both. So when you've got the English words had a Chinese and vice versa, but that didn't happen. So it's quite short, and then we had there was quite a long conversation where Elaine asked questions about racism, about living in Scotland, which was quite interesting. I mean, that took up 45 minutes really. What I felt was we were all passive.
Right. Okay.
And really, what it should have been clearly there was this panel of people giving their experiences, which is great. But I actually think they should have opened the whole thing up to the floor. When it got to the end of it, and there was very quickly, Elaine said, "Oh, anybody got any questions?" And, well, because we'd had the piece of music nearly an hour ago, I wanted to know more about how she made it, because she didn't explain it.
Okay.
She didn't say anything. She didn't say anything about how she got through the process of actually creating this sonic piece, or how many people she spoke to or worked with on it.
Right.
So there's no background to the actual piece, which is
Okay.
a bit of a
That's a
faux
shame.
pas.
'Cause,
It is a
yeah,
shame, because actually I wanted to know more about it.
All right.
So, and it was. She kept saying it was a show. It didn't feel like a show. So slightly disappointed, really. And it was. I mean, the price of it was £12. So it's a normal sort of festival fringe event type thing, but not really for me.
Okay.
No. I'll give it 3 stars. No, if you're having to give it stars.
Okay.
It didn't feel like a show, but that's irrelevant because you can't go and see it. But certainly worth seeing some of the other things that I think they've got coming up. Because
Right.
there's a Polish thing that I quite fancied, but we can't go because we've got something else on.
Right. Okay.
So how was your?
Right. Well, I, meanwhile, went to see Mrs. Roosevelt Flies to London. So this was drama new writing.
Paddington Station. Suddenly, the person inside me is consumed with nerves, just as I was on my wedding tour nearly 40 years ago, with confident, smiling cousin Franklin. By car, with Mrs. Churchill, to see the women, many American, who ferry the big planes across the Atlantic. Each girl lined up with her plane, in the rain. I insist on getting wet too, my now famous hat with the feathers. We'd both had terrible childhoods. We'd both been betrayed in love.
Returning to Edinburgh following a near sellout 2016 Assembly season, Alison Skilbeck's critically acclaimed one-woman show reveals the public and private life of one of the most extraordinary women of the 20th century, Eleanor Roosevelt. And I really enjoyed it.
Good.
I mean, it was probably no surprise to anybody who regularly watches us. Yeah, a woman that I know of. I know she was married to, Franklin D, and that she was quite a strong woman, but I didn't really know an awful lot more about her. And she reflects on parts of her life. The majority of it is reflecting on a visit to London that she made in 1942. And according to, because we were handed bits of paper and it gives a timeline very usefully, and it was for a month, October to November, so it was obviously in the middle of the Second World War. But she reflects back to, very briefly, to when she was a young girl, but her relationships with her family, and all the other people she met. And obviously she was of a standing, so she stayed with the King and Queen. And she entertained other royalty while she was in London. She met Queen Mary, but then she knew Winston Churchill, and then other people in the past. So it was absolutely fascinating. I loved the way she presented it. She's obviously in period.
Was it a one-woman show?
One-woman show,
right.
Yeah. She's in period dress, and on the stage, she often speaks to the troops, or she makes speeches. So sometimes she's got a fabulous coat that she put on, and the famous hat that she wore with little feathers in. And on one side of the stage there was a mic, so that gave it a slightly different sound, as though she was, speaking to a large crowd. Then there was a chair that she used, and then there was a trunk and another small box that she got various props out of.
Would I have enjoyed it?
Yes, I think you would, because I think it would have meant, you'd have been able to relate more to the periods of history that she was talking about.
Okay.
Because
it doesn't sound a million miles away from
Eglantine. No, there were similarities, and what was interesting was at one point she met women who from the Land Army.
Okay.
And then I thought, oh yes, it was Eglantine's sister that set that up. So, it was quite nice for me that there was a link. She herself was, she was the chair of the United Nations Commission formed to draw up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Which was,
so there's a definite connection to what we saw yesterday.
So she, she, like for instance, when she was in London, the troops were complaining of sore feet because their socks were too tight and they needed woolen socks. Well, she made sure that they got woolen socks, that kind of thing. The only thing that sort of jarred, and I mean this is a minor moment, I mean there was a big fantastic wooden trunk which got moved. It got used as seats, or it's where she sat for the tractor, or she was in a car, or she was on a train, and it kept being moved, and I found that a bit distracting, and then for the last sort of 15 minutes or so it stayed in one place, and I didn't think it needed to be moved quite so much, but that was a very personal
it's always quite difficult when props on stages. I mean, we've seen things in the past where literally they're moving stuff around every almost 2 or 3 minutes, it seems like, and it can get distracting, and it can take you away from what you're trying to see. I mean, I know that we've said this before about this. It's difficult. It's we're not we don't make plays, so it is quite difficult.
But I really enjoyed it. I mean, I was engaged the whole time. I found it a fantastic performance about a really, really interesting lady. Also to add is that obviously it was all about Eleanor, but it was very much about FDR as well, because she was constantly referencing him, saying how he would have responded to things, and often what she was doing was, he'd sent her to London. And a lot of her story, obviously, was very, very connected with his. And in fact, just glancing at the timeline again, it's even though there are things relating to Eleanor and the dates and everything, a lot of it is what FDR was doing at that time. So even though she was a very strong woman and very influential in her own right, it's interesting how much FDR featured. It wasn't just about her. It was sort of about him as well. I mean, less about what he was thinking. It was obviously it was what he was doing at that point in time.
I wonder if because obviously first ladies. I mean, I don't know enough about American political history to actually, but I was just thinking about Michelle Obama was clearly was an influential woman when Barack was president. Less so with the Trumps, because we know for the whole of the Trump presidency, we hardly heard of her apart from Melania. Melania. So it's interesting. I'm assuming that First Lady makes what she wants of her role, and clearly Eleanor Roosevelt was quite a formidable lady by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think she was. Lady.
So how many stars?
And I will give it a very strong 4.
Okay, when's it on?
It is on, I will tell you. So it is at the Assembly George Square Studios, Studio 5.
Did you say it was quite hard to find?
Well, it was because I'd convinced myself that it was where Studios 1 to 3 were, that 4 and 5 would be there. 4 and 5 are just in front, down the steps, and it is signposted. You need to just notice the directions on a small column.
Right, okay. Right, that's fine.
So no, it's not hard to find. And it is on at 10:25 in the morning for an hour and 15 minutes. And it is on the whole time right up to the 29th.
Brilliant.
Of the month. Yeah.
And actually, one thing we haven't been saying in our videos is how much it cost So does it say now how much it costs?
It is on various dates, and
Yeah.
obviously I can't read them all out. On various dates, it's 30. Well, no, it takes too long.
Oh, okay.
It's £13.50, and then on other dates, it is £11.
So it's between 11 and 13 quid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. Which is the sort of, for a lot of shows, is the sort of going price up to about 15 quid, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think we should try and say, wherever possible, how much things cost.
Okay.
'Cause, I mean, some things are actually really expensive and it's quite surprising. I mean, there was a thing going around Edinburgh where it's a 2-hour thing in a cab, and the show is in a cab. And I thought, that sounds like quite an interesting thing to do. But it costs something like 100 quid for the cab. You know, now if you're two of you, it's 50 quid a piece. So
Wow.
it's really quite something, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you can get 4 people in, it's not so bad at 25 quid. But to have a theatrical show in a cab seemed like quite an interesting idea.
Yeah.
But so you have to be careful whether things are really, check the prices really.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff.
Okay.
What we've got coming up next, we've got 2 more shows. No, we've got 3 more shows today, I think. We have got, sorry, just talk among yourselves while I try and find the schedule. We've got Fantastically Great Women Who Changed the World coming up next after lunch. Then we've got Oedipus Electronica, and then we have a couple of things this evening. So those reviews will be coming up in due time. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Bye.